My name is Sarah, and this is my circus podcast where I talk about circus things. Today, I want to talk about a really long-standing circus. I'm not sure what you would call exhibit. I'm not quite sure what you would even call it. Definitely a sideshow. The acrobats were definitely lacking in physical ability. It consisted of the most freakiest thing to look at all, babies. And then, even freakier than that, smaller babies. Premature babies were the main stars of this sideshow act that ruled Coney Island in the early to mid 1900s. It went from 1903 to 1940, so about 50 years. This man had babies running his act. Can you believe that? The audacity. I know. You might wonder, what were their apparatuses? Well, it obviously wasn't flying trapeze, it was incubators. What were their costumes? It was actually doll clothes, like literal from toys, because at the time, premature babies, it was seen as some type of cruel law of nature, and they wouldn't even be receptible to medical care. They were just seen as lost causes. I even saw one article that said they were known as trash babies. How sad is that? But to doctor, if you are just listening, I'm doing the quotation fingers around doctor, Martin Cooney saw them as an opportunity. I don't really know what he saw. His story is kind of interesting on what he was doing. His show was called the Infantorium, and it was a legit show where people paid and toured to see premature babies just hanging out in their incubator doing premature baby things. And it's just kind of crazy that you would see somebody swallowing swords. There was a famous dog and monkey show act that they were next to on Coney Island. And yeah, then the premature babies were just hanging out in between that. The families came to Dr. Martin Cooney as a last resort because, like I said, this was a time when there was no medical care at all for premature babies. There was nothing, nada. And he even had an ambulance that would go pick the babies up and bring them to his facility, his sideshow, however you want to call it. It's kind of a mix of both. And guess how much they paid? Nothing. Nada. They didn't pay anything. It was all a completely free medical service provided to them. Cooney used all the money from the ticket sales to fund the show and also pioneer this new field of pediatrics where premature babies actually get medical help and survive. It's impossible to tell how many lives he saved, but it was guessed to be around 8,000. That's a lot of babies. That's a that's a lot. Yeah, it's just so interesting, and it's so different than how something would be set up like that today. And there's a lot of really interesting ways how medical things came around. The medical things we have now, the history behind it is interesting. This is definitely one of them. And so you might be wondering, how did he manage to save so many lives of such a vulnerable? I can't think of anything more vulnerable than a premature baby. How did he manage to save so many lives of premature babies for free? He committed fraud. I mean, I don't know how else you would do that in America. You know what I mean? It's pretty interesting. We just know that he did call himself a physician. When he asked in around the 1930s who he was, and he had already been doing a show for over 20 years by then, he did call himself a physician. And in 1910, there's some records from the US Census stating that he called himself a surgical instrumentalist. I'm not exactly sure what that means. If that meant that he studied the surgical instruments or he made them or he worked with them, there's not really any details of that. He did say that he studied in the Poland area in Berlin, and there's also no records of that. There's no records in Berlin or a city called Leipzig. I'm going to embarrass myself trying to pronounce it. There's no records of him studying any medical sciences in the cities that he stated to. And we're also pretty sure that he changed his name because German, the early 1900s, you can fill in the gaps from there. And the only actual documentation we have is that he came over to the United States at the age of 19 as an undocumented immigrant. Just want to emphasize that he pioneered medicine for premature babies, saved 8,000 lives, give or take, free of charge to the families that needed that medical care. He's an immigrant, just putting that out there. His lack of medical training and lying has brought on some controversy to his story. Some people think, was he trying to exploit it somehow? Can we trust him because he's a liar? We just don't really know. But back in the time, it was a thriving sideshow, and he was absolutely, I think, rightfully praised for setting this up and helping countless lives of babies. He did have one certified doctor working with him, Dr. Julius, I'm trying to find the name, Julius Hess. So his team consisted of himself, eventually his wife and his daughter, who was born later on, and Dr. Julius Hess, and 6 nurses and 2 wet nurses. So that was his, I don't want to say coworkers. I'm trying to think of another word. That was his team, and they ran it very successfully for over 50 years. I just think that's amazing. I think that is amazing how he ran this show and helped so many people for 50 years, and that it just kept on growing. Like, obviously they didn't start with an ambulance, and they started with just a few incubators that he saw from a show in France. What was it called? I'm trying to find it. The 1896 Berlin Exposition. The French bought in the incubating technologies to display. So Dr. Martin Coney, he didn't invent it either. He saw it at this exposition in France, and then he brought it over to the United States and said, hey, like, I think we need this instead of giving up on these babies. And it was incredibly successful. There are interviews of now adults and they were babies that were in the inventorium exhibit, and they just thank him. They talk very well of him. He worked really hard to keep it going and always find ways to help. A ticket to see the premature babies and have a walk through the inventorium was 25 cents per person. According to a quick Google search, that comes out to $25 today. And I just think that it's awesome that he sold enough to keep it up. In 1903, it cost about $15 per day to care for one facility. He ended up with multiple facilities. And then again, a quick Google said that would come out to $405 today. So $405 is how much it would cost to run the facility today. And I don't know about multiple facilities. There's so many things you can take into accountability. Many famous pediatricians came to visit the exhibit, and they studied with him, did residencies there. He's mentioned in a lot of books from very well-known pediatricians and pediatric studies. And it's still, even in the medical field, it still goes back and forth whether he should be practiced. But regardless, he was the first one that brought over the incubators and said, there's people who need these here. There's lives to save with this. And then he just had the brilliant idea that, hey, maybe people want to come look at these little babies. It's just so interesting to me. His inventorium grew so popular in Coney Island, which I don't know if you, so Coney Island is a very famous place where there's a lot of sideshow type of things going on, a carnival. He had two locations there, one in Dreamland and one at Luna Park. There was unfortunately a really big fire in 1911, the Coney Island fire. And that was, even though he saved every single baby out of that, like, this man, I feel like this guy just gets more and more heroic. He saved every single baby out of the fire, and guess what? Guess what? He still had critics coming for him. I think that just shows you no matter how hard you try, you will never be enough from some people. Like this guy did everything possible for the premature babies, and he still had haters. They were all saved from the fire. And the critics still came from him and said, like, well, was it even safe having premature babies in a fire? And it's like, okay, before Dr. Martin Cooney came along, they were literally known as trash babies. They were literally turned away from the hospital. Why are you saying, like, oh, is he even keeping the babies safe? Nobody was doing anything for them before he was. It's it's just crazy to me that he still got critics. But the critics were saying, is it really safe to have premature babies at an amusement park? Along like the peep shows, it's naughty to have the babies by the peep shows and next to the animal type shows, the dog and monkey show. But again, it's just like, okay, that's better than any other options that the families were given when they had premature babies. Like, just let them be, leave them alone. You know what I mean? So it's just, yeah, just take that. If somebody is ever hating on you, just remember there's always going to be people who are just professional haters, and there's nothing you can do to please them. I mean, this guy, he seems like a real gem of a guy, and he still had people hating him. But so Dr. Martin Cooney, he did listen to them and took him over to the Chicago World Fair, which is another big exposition type thing where you can bring anything. That was actually where belly dance was first seen in the United States as well. A lot of history has been brought through the Chicago World Fair. In 1933, Dr. Martin Cooney, he set up shop there and continued just saving lives and growing his facility the best he could. But unfortunately and apparently, Chicago soon after that became the first ever city to implement health policies concerning premature infants. I mean, I guess you don't make a law until there's reason for one, but that just seems very annoying. And if you're wondering what happened after that, because of that law, Dr. Martin Cooney was forced to shut down his exhibit where he was giving all this free care to people, to premature babies and their families, even ambulance rides. Who can afford an ambulance ride nowadays? But he was forced to shut it down, and he even still tried to do the right thing. He tried to donate all of his equipment to hospitals. I just imagine him being like, please continue to help these babies, please. And they didn't take him. They wouldn't take the equipment. I can kind of see that if it's like, you don't know what how it's been maintained and stuff like that. But this just genuinely seems like a guy who wanted to help so badly for the rest of his life. And it's interesting. It does make me wonder if he was a premature baby and we just don't know. Like, I do wish I could ask him, what inspired you to take care of these babies? Like, did you when you were in France and you saw the incubators for the first time, was like a light just ignited in your heart, and you decided, hey, this is my life's calling. I'm doing this. But he started it before he was married and before he had a kid, and then eventually down the line he got married and he had a daughter who passed away pretty early. As a young adult, she passed away, and so there was also nobody to leave his legacy to. But like I said, he didn't. From what I read, he didn't die rich. He just genuinely wanted to help people and help medical research. And in interview, nobody says anything bad about him. It's kind of like, if you're when I it's like reading reviews of like Mr. Rogers. Everybody says he was just a really caring person. And it is crazy to think if he was forced to go to medical school like other doctors, and would he have still had done that if somebody had that path for him. I'm sure it was hard coming over at age 19 as an immigrant with no resources. Medical school is something where you need a lot of support. I don't know how it was back then, but I know now it's just to go through all the things, all the testing, the interviews, and you have to study so much you can't really have a job that will pay for anything. I mean, maybe you can, but it's going to be tough, and like no job with that much flexibility is going to pay you enough to get through medical school. And now we have student loans, which is like crazy, but I can't imagine him as a 19-year-old immigrant going to medical school. And I just think that I think he deserves the credit for where he helped out. That's the biggest argument about him, is should he get credit even though he wasn't a doctor. And of course the critics were worried about his facility, but I think we would have had a lot more cases of babies not making it. But the fact is that he has record cases of babies making it and it being clean, and the fact that people kept on coming back to see, there probably would have been reports that it was gross or dirty or something like that. But unless he has like a really good way of sponging away all the bad critics, even now, or anything anybody bad had to say. But I really think we would have known, especially with in pediatrics, babies are so sensitive to everything, temperature, light. Their immune systems are still building. They really are like I said, like the one of the most vulnerable populations is the premature babies. So I just feel like if it really was dirty or he was doing something bad or something, the babies would not have survived. There would have been some type of evidence with that. And whoever would have thought that, we would have babies as a circus sideshow? I just think that's so interesting. And what was allowed back then as a type of entertainment. I guess anything can be entertainment. And some people say too, when you read about him, is like, was he exploiting babies? Because it sounds bad. It sounds really bad at first, like, he's exploiting babies. But I don't think he was. I think he actually wanted to help. And I'm glad he succeeded while he did. I wish somehow his practice could have continued and keep on growing and getting better, but that's not what happened. But yeah, thank you for listening. That is the story for today. I got all my information from PBS and the Smithsonian. Yes, so until the next episode, I do have a full-time job and do some other jobs, so it takes me a while to research these things and put it together. But thank you for listening.